What's good, YouTube? It's your boy, Blue Blood Sports TV, back at y'all with another one. So, undefeated, two division, world champion. Currently, WBA regular, lightweight world champion. Gervonta Tank Davis will be taking on four division world champion, Mexican superstar boxer, Leo Santa Cruz, October 24th. Pay-per-view. His first pay-per-view headlining card. With that said, he has been on pay-per-view events. He was on the co-main event of Floyd Mayweather and Conor McGregor. And he has been the headliner in some big cards. His homecoming fights in Baltimore and his fight in Atlanta with Yuriorkis Gamboa, his most recent fight. So with that said, of course, he's going to be doing interviews, doing appearances, making appearances, to promote his upcoming fight with Leo Santa Cruz. That's a pay-per-view event. And so he was on the Last Stands podcast with Brian Custer. And Brian Custer asked him, should he get past Leo Santa Cruz, October 24th? Boxing is a sport of, we always look past what we have in front of us to the future. We're never satisfied as fans, boxing pundits, media, such, right? And it's a sport of what have you done for me lately? So the sport of boxing just always is demanding that you have your meal in front of you and your meal preparing on the stove. As soon as you finish that meal, you got to get to the next one, right? That's how the sport of boxing works. And so Brian Custer asked Gervonta Tank Davis what's going to be his next move. Who would he want to fight next? And then Brian Custer started throwing names at him and said, what about these guys? He got to the longest reigning champion now currently in the sport of boxing, WBC featherweight world champion, superstar boxer, Mr. Gary Russell Jr., who's a native of that DMV area, who's from D.C., and they have that built-in rivalry. And Mr. Gary Russell Jr. has been calling out Gervonta Tank Davis for quite some time now. Gary Russell Jr. has one loss on his resume, that coming at the hands of another guy on this list that we'll get to later, in unified three-division world champion and currently the lightweight unified WBA, IBF, and WBO lightweight world champion, WBC, WBA, and WBO lightweight world champion, superstar boxer, Vasily High-Tech Lomachenko. And there's also another guy on this list that wasn't mentioned, but I'm going to make mention of him. With that said, let's continue on the path of Gary Russell. He said that Gary Russell is not a draw. Gary Russell only sells out the small MGM, which, if you guys don't know, is the MGM Grand that's in the DMV area. He says he only sells out the small T-Mobile Arena. We need guys that can actually sell out the big MGM Grand. We need guys that can actually sell out the big T-Mobile Arena, not guys doing domestic small venues. That's Gary Russell Jr. Not to mention, he's small in his stature as well as he's small in his aura, right? In the sport, as far as his selling point. So he says he's just too small for me. So he dismisses Gary Russell Jr. Then he goes on to Vasily Lomachenko. He says that's a fight that possibly could happen, but it won't happen till 2021 because it has to build. Why does this have to build when Gervonta Tank Davis is seen as the A side? He's seen as, according to Floyd Mayweather Promotions CEO Leonard Ellaby, he is the pay-per-view star. According to Floyd Mayweather, he's the next Floyd Mayweather in the sport. How he's being built, right? So he is that guy. And should he be successful in his pay-per-view outing with Leo Santa Cruz, he's that guy, right? This solidifies him. Vasily Lomachenko is already solidified. He's a three-division world champion. If he beats the other guy that wasn't mentioned in this conversation, Teofimo Lopez, undefeated IBF lightweight world champion superstar boxer. But if Vasily Lomachenko gets past Teofimo Lopez 1 week before Gervonta Tank Davis fights Leo Santa Cruz. He says that, he'll fight him in 2021. Vasily Lomachenko will be undisputed and a 3-division world champion. Has the greatest amateur background. He can't get an opportunity. You still need to let that fight cook. Again, I want to delve back into Gary Russell Jr. as well, because he said that Gary Russell Jr. is too small. But he's fighting a guy that came up in the same weight classes as Gary Russell Jr. and Leo Santa Cruz. Most people feel like Leo Santa Cruz in stature is too small for Gervonta Tank Davis. But you're fighting Leo Santa Cruz, a guy that avoided Gary Russell Jr. as well, right? Then we move forward to, so he dismisses Vasily Lomachenko and his accomplishments. Vasily Lomachenko is the most accomplished and widely considered, some people consider him the best pound-for-pound boxer in the world. He's definitely top 3. And he's definitely considered the best lightweight, featherweight, and super featherweight in all of boxing. Vasily Lomachenko. So you have to let that fight brew as well. He's done his part. He's already accomplished. He's already established. If anybody has to establish themselves to build the fight, it would have to be Gervonta Tank Davis. But we know Vasily Lomachenko is getting older as well. So he doesn't have much time. So it kind of feels like they're trying to, age him out. Then we get to Devin the Dream Haney, undefeated WBC lightweight superstar boxer. And he says that he's a clout baby, meaning that Devin Haney is only calling me out because of my status, and he's trying to gain status off of my back. Well, they have a history. They have 2 glorified sparring sessions that the world knows about and the world is in tune with. And we know that Devin Haney's father, trainer, and manager recently stated that Gervonta Tank Davis got the better of Devin Haney in the first fight, the first sparring session. But in the second sparring session, it's being assumed that Devin Haney made Gervonta Tank Davis quit in the second sparring session that took place at Floyd Mayweather Gym. The first sparring session took place in Baltimore. The second sparring session, according to these reports and numerous different people that were in attendance, they state that this fight, the rematch, right? The re-sparring session, it was until somebody submitted, and they're saying that Gervonta Tank Davis ran out of gas, and he said, that's it, that's enough. Devin Haney holds the WBC lightweight title. He himself is a superstar in the sport of boxing. As far as these young crop of upcoming rising boxers, 25 and under, you can't deny that Devin Haney is already there. But then he points to a possible showdown. He doesn't make mention of Teofimo Lopez at all. Says he doesn't like Teofimo's style, doesn't like Teofimo Lopez. In a recent, not this particular interview, but he said this in something else, and didn't even mention Teofimo Lopez as a possible opponent. And Teofimo Lopez could beat Vasily Lomachenko and become undisputed in his own right in that same 135-pound division. But now Gervonta Tank Davis is stating that he don't feel comfortable at 135. So if he does in the future fight at 135 again, he'll come in at 132, the lowest possible weight to compete at 135. But then in the same token, a guy that he makes mention next, he says, we'll revisit Lomachenko after our next couple of fights. And then his next couple of fights, he says, Leo Santa Cruz, and get this, undefeated, rising, lightweight contender. I'm going to say this again. Undefeated, rising, lightweight, superstar contender, not a champion. King Ryan Garcia, who, get this, is the same age as Devin Haney and hasn't accomplished as much as Devin Haney. And Gervonta Tank Davis is pointing to the fact that he has a huge social media following. But in the same breath, he's telling the world that Devin Haney is not worth the fight because he's clout chasing. But he's going to fight Ryan Garcia because Ryan Garcia has a huge social media following. And he likens him to that of former 5-division world champion, 6-time world champion, Oscar the Golden Boy De La Hoya, who just so happens to promote Ryan Garcia with Golden Boy Promotions and has a rivalry with Floyd Mayweather. So they're going to try to relive Floyd Mayweather versus Oscar De La Hoya, which broke at the time all pay-per-view records. So that's what they're looking to relive with Oscar De La Hoya and Floyd Mayweather Part 2, but they're doing it through Gervonta Tank Davis and Ryan Garcia, which I'm not mad at all. But you cannot discredit Vasily Lomachenko, Devin Haney, Gary Russell Jr., and Teofimo Lopez, but say that Ryan Garcia is a credible opponent because of his social media following. You can't say Devin Haney is clout chasing, but then say you want to fight with Ryan Garcia because of his huge social media following. So you want to fight with Ryan Garcia because of his huge social media following, so it builds your clout. You are able to absorb his clout, and it builds your clout. Right? You're able to absorb his fan base, and it uplifts your fan base. So he's the guy that you believe that can sell out the quote-unquote big MGM. He's the guy you believe that could sell out the quote-unquote big T-Mobile Center. But he hasn't done anything in the sport of boxing. Actually, all the other guys, Vasily Lomachenko is far more accomplished than Ryan Garcia. Gary Russell's the longest reigning champion in the sport of boxing currently. He's done more than Ryan Garcia and fought better opposition than Ryan Garcia. Devin Haney is the WBC undefeated champion in the same age, and he's the world champion. So he's accomplished more than Ryan Garcia. Teofimo Lopez beat Richard Comey for the IBF title in dramatic fashion, knocking him out, and is going into a bout with Vasily Lomachenko that he could possibly win and be undisputed, according to the rules, the new rules created by the WBC sanction body and President Mauricio Suleiman and their board, that the franchise champion now, Vasily Lomachenko, can lose that title to Teofimo Lopez. So Teofimo Lopez essentially could become undisputed champion. Right? So now let's look at it from this standpoint. What has Ryan Garcia done to deserve the opportunity to fight Gervonta Tank Davis? Leo Santa Cruz, if you're saying he's small, he's never sold out big venues. What big venues has Leo Santa Cruz headlined as a pay-per-view event and sold out? Has he sold out the MGM Grand? Has he sold out the T-Mobile as the headliner? The biggest fight on Leo Santa Cruz's resume is the Carl Frampton fight. And that was a huge fight. And Carl Frampton brought a huge fan base that's bigger than Leo Santa Cruz fan base from the UK. His British fan base is bigger than Leo Santa Cruz fan base here in the States. And then he fought Abner Mares a few times. So who has Leo Santa Cruz beat, and what has Leo Santa Cruz accomplished as far as selling point to be considered bigger than Mr. Gary Russell Jr.? Gary Russell Jr. wasn't given the opportunity to fight Leo Santa Cruz, Abner Mares, or any of these other guys. Yes, he did lose to Vasily Lomachenko, but guess what? Leo Santa Cruz lost to Carl Frampton. Abner Mares lost to Leo Santa Cruz, and Leo Santa Cruz gave him a rematch. And the first fight wasn't that close to begin with. But that warranted him getting a rematch instead of him fighting Gary Russell Jr. So what has Leo Santa Cruz done again to deserve this opportunity And what does Ryan Garcia has done to deserve this opportunity? Aside from quote unquote having a Mexican fan base. So Gervonta Tank Davis is saying that essentially he's not fighting any of these big fights. He's looking for the biggest money fight. But at the same token, he's telling the world that Devin Haney is a clout baby, just clout chasing off of his name. But essentially, isn't that what he's doing? So let's see how this all plays out. But that's all I got for y'all. Y'all already know what it is. It's your boy Blue, Blue Blood Sports TV. Hey, like, comment, and subscribe. You haven't subscribed? Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the bell icon to get all the new notifications. Follow me on Instagram at Blue Blood Sports TV, all one word. Y'all already know what it is. Shouts out to the entire LDBC. Shouts out to New Media. Shouts out to Black Media Row. Make sure you like and share these videos. That's all I got for y'all. Peace.